that, I would like to give the floor to our moderator, Mr. Zsolt Darvas. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me also welcome everyone. We are going to have a very interesting discussion today, I'm sure. The Recovery and Resilience Facility is clearly a landmark instrument in the history of the European Union. It has never happened before that the European Union decided to set up a fund which borrows from the market in order to finance common goals. The common goals include certainly a recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also, quite importantly, as also the name of the Recovery and Resilience Facility suggests, to support the resilience of European Union economies in the future, and in particular support the next 6 years between 21 and 26 for the green and digital transitions. Now, in our event today, we will focus on Greece and in particular the digital transition in Greece. We know that Greece lags behind in many indicators on the digital transition. So clearly there is a lot of work to do. And we also know that Greece is among the countries that received the largest amount of money from the facility, along with Croatia and Bulgaria. So clearly we are looking at a country which has a lot to do and also receives a lot of resources to finance the transition. First of all, we will have an opening remark by Nicholas Milinois, who is the Greek member of the European Court of Auditors. And then we will have two distinguished guests from Greece discussing these and related issues. Ms. Anna Diamantopoulou, who is a former commissioner and the current chair of the European Union High-Level Committee on the future of the welfare state, social protection and labor. And we will have Mr. Kyriakos Pyrekakis, who is the Greek Minister of Digital Governance and also the chair of the OECD's Global Strategy Group. But first of all, let us hear the opening remark of Mr. Nikolaos Milinois. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Darvas. Dear colleagues, let me first extend my welcome to our guests, Mrs. Diamantopoulou and Mr. Pyrekakis, and of course, to you, Mr. Darvas. I would also like to thank our auditor Thanos Koustoulides for his excellent initiative and for his support in organizing this event. I'm very glad to see a high number of participants to this debate this morning on such an interesting and important topic. In May 2020, the European Commission proposed the Next Generation EU as part of the wide-ranging package to reduce the socio-economic impact of the COVID pandemic. Within the NGEU, the Recovery and Resilience Facility is playing the biggest role with around 700 billion euros in grants and loans. To benefit from this support, member states prepare the Recovery and Resilience Plan, setting out the reforms and investments to be implemented by the end of 2026. The RRF aims at contributing to the EU's target at climate neutrality by 2050 and setting Europe on a path of digital transition while creating jobs and stimulating growth. In fact, targets are set for spending on both climate measures and the digital transition. The European Court of Auditors, with my colleague Ivana Malevich, is reporting member, is already carrying out an audit to assess the approval process of the National Recovery and Resilience Plans, which will focus in particular on their contribution to the digital transformation. We have also planned a number of audits on the control systems underpinning the RRF, on the absorption challenges and, of course, on the RRF performance, which is the core of the new facility. Greece's recovery and resilience plan will be supported by around 18 billion euros in grants and 13 billion euros in loans. The plan includes reforms addressing bottlenecks to lasting and sustainable growth, concerning, for instance, active labor market policies and the public administration. It is meant to lift Greece's gross domestic product and create thousands of new jobs. Some 23% of the plan will foster the digital transition with investments and reforms in the digitalization of public administration and private sector companies with regard to both connectivity and digital skills. To discuss the growth opportunities and challenges of the Recovery Fund, we have three very distinguished experts with us today. Let me say something more about our guests. Anna Diamantopoulou is chair of the European Commission's high-level group on the future of social protection and of the welfare state in the EU and president of Diktio, Network for Reform in Greece and Europe, a leading not partisan Athens-based think tank. Mrs. Diamantopoulou served as the European Commissioner for Employment, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities and has held several significant portfolios as minister in the Greek government as well. She was Minister of Development, Competitiveness and Shipping, and prior to that, Minister of Education, Research and Technology and Lifelong Learning. Mr. Kyriakos Pierakakis is the Minister of Digital Governance in the cabinet of Kyriakos Mitsotakis. He is a computer political science and politician, of course, and served as Director of Research at the Aneosis, an independent non-profit think tank. He has also worked on technology policy for various research institutes in Greece and abroad, and headed Youth Foundation as president. In some words for you, Mr. Zolt. You are senior, Mr. Zolt's Darvas is senior fellow and economist at the Brussels-based Bruegel think tank and senior research fellow at the Corvinus University of Budapest. He previously served as research advisor of the Agenda Financial Research Group in Budapest and as a deputy hand in the research unit at the Central Bank of Hungary. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to our panel for what I'm sure will be a very interesting debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Milinois, for these nice and informative introductory remarks. We agreed with the speakers that we would start with Minister Pierakakis, who will describe the overall Greek growth strategy, the role of the resilience facility in it, and then focus on the green aspects of the plan. So, Mr. Minister, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. It's a great joy to participate at this event of the European Court of Auditors, and it's always a joy to share the stage with Anna Diamantopoulou, whose thought leadership on these topics is known both in Greece and throughout the European Union. And needless to say, the topic of digital transformation has been at the epicenter, at the core of the agenda of this government, certainly in the COVID period, but I would claim even before the COVID period. 2.5 years ago, under the leadership of Kyriakos Mitsotakis, this government created a new ministry for digital governance with new functions, having studied the best case studies which were the most relevant for the Greek case, while also leveraging upon the capabilities that the Greek digital system already had, and of course the threats and the gaps that existed throughout our digital system. We created a very strong ministry at the core of government, which centralized both the procurement capacities for digital, the digital strategy of the government under its stewardship also became a core element, and I think most centrally, We guaranteed the capability to interoperate all the systems of the state, thus rendering the role of the minister of this ministry both a CTO and a CIO of the government, which was very crucial given the bureaucratic challenges that Greece has been facing vis-à-vis administrative burdens and all the relevant studies that were advanced in the previous decades. A core KPI, a core key performance indicator of the job of this ministry. And in these 2.5 years, and also given the COVID effect, which accelerated certain things by necessitating government continuity with regards to state services, we have managed to achieve significant results. I think that the results are basically manifested by two numbers so far. The first number that manifests the result is the creation of a government portal, gov.gr, an EU policy, having government portals for the digital public services, which started by 503 digital services, 501 pre-existing ones, plus 2 new ones, the most frequently used services of the Greek state, like power of attorney, in March 2020. And a bit less than 2 years later, we have managed to surpass 1,300 digital services offered by the government portal. Now, if you make the division, this constitutes around 1 service a day created, around 1 new service per day created in those 2 last years, which by itself is measured by the service provided to citizens. And this is the second number that I will quote: digital transactions. Now, we can have a sense of the number of digital transactions effectively by adding 2 numbers. The first number is how many times citizens logged in the systems of the state by using their credentials. And there, we're using the credentials of the tax system, taxes, which we already have in Greece, and we have universalized access for it, for digital public services. But we have also interpreted the EIDAS directive of the European Union by increasing the scope of other potential credentials, having, let's say, a wallet of potential identities, by also using the credentials of the banking system in Greece for more secure services provided by the Greek state, which we're also accepting. So we can check how many times citizens logged in, but more importantly, having been very much inspired by the Estonian paradigm of X-Road, meaning having an interoperability center at the core of government through which the state itself can ask for data, implementing the once-only principle, meaning that if you give me your consent as a citizen, the Greek state can offer access to specific data that it already has. We can also see how many times access was provided to the interoperability center. If you add those 2 numbers up, you can have a sense of the physical lines of citizens that were avoided by digital services. So what was the evolution of this number of overall digital transactions over time? The Greek state started from 8.8 million digital transactions in 2018, which is quite low for a country which has a population of around 10.7 million citizens. And now we have, this number has evolved from 8.8 million in 2018 to 34 million in 2019 to 94 million in 2020, and in 2021, 567 million. So this is a classical exponential curve from 8.8 million digital transactions to 567 million digital transactions. Now, the way this has happened is by creating a new, let's say, neural network of connections between pre-existing state systems to a certain extent. What had happened in Greece for digital services is that even in the past, through previous European structural fund periods, we had started obtaining certain systems for state services, but what we never did was to connect those systems from a citizen-centric perspective, meaning rewire the way the state offers services to citizens. Let's say from the birth of a child until the passing of a loved one, in this continuum of life events, we are re-engineering the steps that citizens need to take in order to be served by the state using those interoperability platforms. By making this change, by changing the way citizens are served in core life events, by leveraging the pre-existing systems, we have managed to see this escalation of new services. This has been crucial even during the pandemic. To give you one example, we have had a very interesting e-prescription system for around 9 years now. But what we never did, for instance, was to augment this system by having Greek citizens offer us their mobile phones and receive their prescriptions on their mobile phones in order to receive their prescription by the pharmacy stores by showing the mobile phone rather than a printed piece of paper. This was crucial for the lockdown. It's crucial for other elements of the economy as well, which you can imagine, because it increases transparency. But this was a very simple, let's say, add-on to a pre-existing system. So what we have done so far is create this new neural network of systems. But in reality, in order to make the next step, the RRF is absolutely instrumental. It's a Marshall Plan for Greece, effectively, for our period. It was mentioned before that 23% of this plan is consecrated towards digital goals. To give you one example why this project is crucial, since 2019, we had started constructing our digital strategy, which we call the Digital Bible. The Digital Bible is interesting because it's not only a strategic document, it's an implementation plan. It has codified around 440 projects, which will be implemented by 2025. We started doing the maths of constructing this Digital Bible in 2019, pre-RRF. And what we found out back then was that by conducting a very simple gap analysis of the necessary systemic elements of the past, not per se by bringing the new systems and investing in all the new technologies that we need in order to transition to the new period, systems in artificial intelligence or 5G, highways, etc. Only the gap analysis of the past, we didn't have enough funds to implement the necessary strategy. To give you one example, a very big element of the RRF, of this big project, around 700 million euros, is consecrated towards something very, very simple, the digitization of paper records. One of the reasons why still in Greece it takes more time to issue a pension when someone is about to get her or his pension is because we haven't digitized patient records, pension records, the social security records. Same for patient records. This is another digitization agenda. Same in the justice system, same in the cadastre. So a part of the RRF, let's say, in a part of the RRF, we're investing in big projects which should have taken place many years ago. In another element of the RRF, exactly because the RRF is quite instrumental, we're investing in new technologies and in new projects which can enable us to transition to a new period. I mentioned 5G highways. Around in 2,000 kilometers of Greece's highways, we will install systems of high-frequency 5G antennas, which will enable driverless trucks to begin with. So between this continuum of extremes, the digitization of old records and 5G highways and microsatellites in accordance with the Breton vision for microsatellites, one can imagine a full spectrum of projects that we're missing. To give you one example from the health system, from health digital policy, I mentioned that we have a very comprehensive e-prescription system. So our strategy is in effect to squeeze the potential policy outcomes that we can get from this system by leveraging it. To give you one example, we can make predictive medicine. We can use the mobile phones of citizens given prescription history, and we can propose specific types of medical exams to citizens. We plan to do this year in order to facilitate the service of the health system. So this is something that we can do with an existing system. But in order to have full electronic patient records, we also need to upgrade the IT systems of all our hospitals. And we also need to create a new interoperability center, which will connect all the various elements of the health system in order to produce full electronic patient records through interoperability. In order to do this, we needed new investment. The existing systems weren't enough, and we needed new investment at scale. And this will be achieved through the RRF, and this is why the RRF is instrumental. Now, of course, the RRF does not drive the strategy. The strategy drives the RRF. We had the strategy, we knew what we wanted to do, we focused on all the available funds that we had, the RRF primarily, the previous European structural funds period, the next European structural funds period, elements of our national budget, the potential to use public-private partnerships in digital and in IT. And by leveraging all of those elements together with private investment, specifically in telecommunications, we have the potential right now to leapfrog, not only to cover the distance, but to actually leapfrog. And there are a series of elements produced by our digital system in the last 2.5 years, which manifest this point. And I will end by noting down those three elements. The first one is the vaccination system which Greece produced, which has been amongst the best in the European Union. The second one is an outcome of this system, the digital EU COVID certificate, which was a proposal by the Greek Prime Minister to the Commission, but which became a proposal on the basis that we already had a digital system A to Z, and we could use a very simple digital outcome of the system in order to create a policy and advance a policy at scale at the EU level. And finally, in telecommunications, which is, I would say, the most challenging of the areas that Greece is facing in the overall digital system, we managed to produce a 5G auction, which has been considered one of the most innovative, certainly in Europe. And the key innovation here is not the structure of the auction itself, which includes all the 5G bands, which other countries didn't necessarily manage to do. We auctioned 4 bands of 5G frequencies together. It's the fact that we're using 25% of the funds of the auction in order to create a specialized venture capital fund, which will invest in the 5G ecosystem, and we are thus instrumentalizing an auction to create a market. And this is perceived as a very structural innovation in the way in which 5G networks will be advanced throughout the Union. On a final point, specifically in telecommunications, Greece has good performance in mobile, which is not captured by international, I would say, like the DES index, by international indices. It's captured by sub-elements of the DES index. According to UCLA, Greece is 25th in the world in mobile. Greece has a huge challenge in fixed. We're 100th in the world in fixed telephony. Part of the reason is the geography of the country. Part of the reason is the lack of investments in the challenging economic periods of the past. And there, all those new financial potential of both the RRF and the European structural funds overall enable us to cover this distance and again leapfrog in a period of, let's say, the next 5 years. The challenge will be in fixed telephony and the transition to fiber. And there we're also subsidizing demand, subsidizing supply, and subsidizing the core market failures that exist in the system. One of them, anecdotally, and I will end with that, is the fact that there is a market failure even at the installation of fiber in blocks of flats in Athens, because there is a big debate about how to split the cost of fiber readiness in a building. So all of those micro elements necessary in order to advance an overall digital system have the potential to be covered and have the potential to be fixed exactly because we have this new capacity in our hands. And this is a capacity, I would say, and an overall possibility which we don't plan to miss. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Now, before passing the floor to Ms. Diamantopoulou, let me have 2 follow-up questions to you. I mean, the first one is that you mentioned many impressive numbers on how Greece progressed on certain aspects of digital transition. For example, the number you said that in 2018 there was only 8.8 million digital transactions, which has grown to over 550 million by 2021 is absolutely impressive. But my question is that how much Greece has converged to, let's say, the average of the EU? Because, I mean, you mentioned these DESI indicators and also suggested some, it's not a complete set of indicators, some information is missing. But when I looked at those indicators, Greece was among the poorest performers in various digital aspects of public administration and also the private use of digital technologies. So I wonder what progress you have achieved so far. So how much you let's say converge to the mean of the EU. And my second question is that what's the role of the Recovery and Resilience Facility in that? Because you said that you already had a strategy that you started to implement even before the Recovery and Resilience Facility was launched. So whether it's just, helps financing what you anyway planned before and would have done even without the facility, or whether this facility brings some new dimensions which would have not been possible, for example, due to financing constraints without it. So if you could answer this question, I would be grateful. But let me also ask the audience that if you have a question, please feel free to write it. There is a chat function in Teams. On the top bar, you can see show conversations, and if you click there, then you can one question has already been raised. So feel free to ask your questions, and then I will ask our panelists to answer those questions. But Minister, the floor is yours now.
To answer the second question first, the RRF is absolutely instrumental. It wouldn't have been possible to implement the strategy without the RRF, because the strategy surpassed the financial means that we had in the previous period. So in reality, the RRF is a sine qua non in order to achieve what we want to do. My point before was that it's not the RRF that drives the strategy, meaning that the RRF needs to fit the pre-existing strategy rather than have a strategy fully driven by the RRF. And it was very good that we had prepared before and we had a list of things that we wanted to do by reverse engineering the problem that we had in our hands. Thus, we were able to quickly propose specific projects that we needed because we had a very clear gap analysis of what was missing in the digital system of Greece in all the dimensions of digital. Now, with regards to international indices, digital is 4 things, and those are the 4 things that in reality are being measured by indices such as the DES index. It's the digitization of the public sector, it's telecommunications, it's skills, the human resource element, and it's the penetration of digital in the private sector. In my view, there are many indices that capture certain elements better than others. I think that the DES index does a very good job in terms of capturing the real equilibrium in private sector penetration and human capital, because this involves pure statistics coming from the statistical authorities. In telecommunications, the DES index adversely focuses on fixed and in a non-technologically neutral way, fiber rather than service. So in my view, as I mentioned before, I think that the UCLA statistics are better in terms of capturing what's happening on the ground. We have a good performance at mobile. The problem is purely at fixed, which needs to be captured. And there, we're not a performer. But in reality, the RRF will enable us, together with the private investments that have been announced, to catch up, and in fiber as well. But one needs to take into account the fact that this technological system is also being disrupted by microsatellites, by private companies that are offering full coverage in certain areas. And this is something which will change as an equilibrium and as a KPI itself in the coming years. And finally, in digital public services, my claim would be that it's quite qualitative in terms of capturing. The DES index has a lag. It captures the first and the second quarter of 2020, let's say, this year's. So it has a lag of around 1.5 years. I believe that in terms of digital public services, there are many studies that one can take into account. There was a study by Deloitte which shows full convergence to the EU average in terms of digital public services only. And to note another example, Greece got the global award of WITSA, of the global organization on digital public sector innovation. So exactly because in terms of digital public services, the measure and the metric is more qualitative, I would say that in reality, what we're trying to do, rather than focusing on the index per se, is to focus on services and focus on what's missing on the ground. And in this regard, we have a feeling which is captured by this number that I mentioned before, the 567 million transactions, which showcases that progress is being made and the needle is moving. We won't stop moving the needle, and we won't stop increasing the speed through which we move the needle. And again, there, the RRF will be instrumental, in my view, not only to catch up, but to manage to actually showcase potential and unleash the potential of an ecosystem of engineers and programmers that we have in Greece, which is, I would say, quite significant and quite important.
Thank you very much, Minister. The study you mentioned about full convergence of digital public services is really impressive, and in fact, let me congratulate for the achievement. Now let us turn to Mr. Anna Diamantopoulou, who will scrutinize more about the social dimensions of digital transition in Greece and the role of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And let me quote one of the statement of Minister Pirakakis, who said that they are deploying 5G along 500 kilometers of highways in Greece, allowing driverless tracks to proceed. Now, certainly this is efficient from a technological perspective, but it also means that there will be fewer truck drivers needed, and those people will need to find a job. And I'm afraid there are many other areas of the digital transition in which digital technologies will replace human work. So indeed, I think the social challenges is really substantial. So I really wonder how you think these challenges and what solutions could be given to that. So the floor is yours, Ms. Diamantopoulou.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for this invitation, and particularly I would like to thank you, Mr. Koustoulidis and Mr. Pavachikos, for organizing this, and of course, Mr. Milionis for his own participation. Regarding the panel, I would like to tell you that I'm really happy to be with Minister Pirakakis, who, although he's minister for first time, he has become a kind of thrill in Greece because of his effectiveness. And I'm really happy that Zlot Darvas is with us because we have been together and we have worked together in very difficult periods for Greece during the Great Recession and in periods that Greece had lost 25% of its GDP in a few months. So this is a very interesting discussion concerning the participants as well, and thank you all participants for being here, because all we are now planning, and you will be checking over in some years from now or even now. And the real check will not concern just numbers, but also tangible and marked impact on the Greek and European economy and society. I must say that I gladly accepted to participate in this discussion, as throughout my political journey in Greece and in Europe, I have always been insisting that Greece's primarily national goal should have been to rise to global digital revolution's avant-garde. Is it very ambitious? Yes, it is. I've written 2 books on that, one in 2006 and one in 2019, and I do believe that this is the way out for the new growth model of Greece. Since my remarks will focus digital transformation and changes in social protection, let me just put first thing first. What is the starting point? I think it is very interesting to know it in order to evaluate the progress in Greece and to understand the need of reforms. Concerning DESI indicators, there was already discussion. Greece is 25th among 27 countries. So as Minister Pirakakis has explained to me, things are quite different in connectivity and in public sectors in cases that he has already described. But I have to say that in public sector as a whole, things are not very well. I mean, the digital performance in agriculture ministry or in justice, etc., is not the one we wanted to have. There is a problem with digital skills and the educational system because of the educational system. And of course, there is a very poor performance in companies. According to Joint Research Center and the Greek National Statistics Service, a very recent one, the previous week, 10 out of 20 most in-demand professions in Greece have zero capacity to be done remotely through teleworking. You can understand what it means for periods like the pandemic or for the future. And why? Because this is because of the very poor digital performance of firms in Greece and its impact to Greek labor market and the operational model. So the starting point, it's not an easy one. Mr. Pirakakis has, as I already said, an outstanding performance with very concrete effects, but we have to take into account that the starting point is not easy for many and different reasons. Now, the discussion today is how the digital agenda of Greece fits with the recovery and resilience plan. My first point is that yes, it does. And the second one is that it does it in a very concrete way. The first point is that there is a digital Bible, which is the first time that the Greece has a national plan for digital strategy. And the second one is that if somebody has a look to Greece 2.2, which is the Greek National Recovery and Resilience Plan, can very easily understand that there is a primary goal to build a brand new, open, green, and digital growth model. And the 2 points that there is emphasis is green and digital transition. So these are the good news. the political will is here, there is a concrete plan, and because of the recovery plan, there are money here. There's money here. Now, digital transformation should be considered through two different lenses. First, the necessary reforms so as to reach the European average by 2026. Achieving this goal is indispensable to ensure Greece's enhanced interaction with EU and world markets. Second, and equally important, all that it takes to prepare ourselves for social and economic impact of this transition. And I'm not talking only about Greece, but also the whole of Europe, because there are some member states who are more advanced, but this is a main issue for Europe as a whole, for the world as a whole, I could say. And this is the mandate that the high-level group I chair is. And this is a mandate for studying the future of the welfare state, its financing, and its interconnection with the changing working model. What it is really important in Europe, where the welfare state and social protection is the diamond on the crown of the European model, is to enable continued solidarity between and within generations, and to what we need is to offer continuous sustainable access to all groups, taking into account two very interesting issues. Taking into account two interesting issues. The first one is that social contributions will change, and labor taxes may be will be decreased. So these are problems that are not for the next decade, but they are in front of us. Now, given the current welfare state policies, and in Greece, the pension, health, unemployment benefits, they all have been developed on the standard model of employment relations of the post-war era, although there are many reforms, but this is the basic model. And the digital transformation will have profound consequences for welfare provisions. Just a number again, 60% of workers at the European level, less than 60% have a standard work contract. And in Greece, the number is 45. We could speak a lot about what non-standard forms of work are in our era and what is the impact in the social protection system, but I will focus on digitalization. And there is, we could distinguish in digitalization three categories in new types of labor, according to the professors of high-level group. And each of these has a different implication for work, for personal life, and for social protection. It's automation of work, artificial intelligence and robots. It is use of sensors and rendering devices, Internet of Things, 3D printing, virtual and augmented reality, and of course the platforms, the coordination by platforms. Platforms become a very hot issue. There are many discussions about new regulations, new way of taxation, each one of the issues which becoming more and more hot day by day. These forms of work in this digital era have many advantages, but at the same time, they are disrupting working time, rights as we knew them, rights of workers, payments, and there is an impact, as I said at the beginning, in social contribution and taxation. So if we have less revenues for the welfare state in 10 years, we understand that whatever we do now, it will not have the impact we want. Because beyond the labor issues, there are inequalities. There is the issue of inequalities. And digitalization they deepen existing divisions, and particularly in educational attainment, in immigration background, in areas of ages and gender. The gap between those who have effective access to information technologies and those who are excluded from it, it's a gap which maybe create and trigger economic, social, and cultural disparities with obvious economic and political repercussions. And in countries like Greece, when there are really big there is a division in regions, a division in classes, a division in areas, and really big problems in the educational system, it is a first priority to understand that we have to invest on the issue of inequalities, of stopping inequalities, of dealing with inequalities at the same time as we invest and we reform our state in order to come to the digital era. And then I would like just to make a comment. It's a very philosophical and political question about new rights. So there is a right to connection in order to improve the processes of allocation of jobs opportunities. And that means that we need good internet connection. Mr. Pierakakis has already discussed about that, and I think it's a priority to have a good internet connection in each village of the country, because in this case, there is support to significant sectors of the labor market that make use of the intermediation of digital platforms. The second right, which again will be in the center of discussions, it is the right in participating in lifelong learning, which means that the states must have an obligation to offer this lifelong learning for the digital era, and the citizens must be obliged to participate in these sectors. Otherwise, they will be excluded from the society. Now, coming to Greece, there has been significant legislative initiatives during the last years, and they have taken into account the knowledge society and the digital era. However, there are many constraints that have put a brake on change. There is a weak state-sponsored industrial and innovation policies, combined with low private investment in R&D. There is not an active social dialogue, and this is very, very important for the coming years when we have all these big changes in the labor market and the way that companies function. And this is one of the issues, that there is a poor administration. I mean, there is not a poor, there is not a not effective administration. These shortcomings have been exacerbated by the prolonged public underfunding of education and research during the economic crisis, and issues like the research reform. There we have seen many important steps, and education reforms are priorities for the digital era, and at the same time for fighting inequalities. And here there are two main issues. The first one is how to update the curricula to fit the digital age in primary and secondary schools. And the second one is the long-awaited reform of tertiary education in Greece, the need of connecting the universities with market, and one of the main issues, how how young people should turn to professions whose demand is growing higher and higher. And there are sectors, there is unemployment, 13-14% in Greece, and at the same time, there are sectors that they cannot find the proper people. Now, history shows that although reforms is a difficult equation and requiring immense courage and political will in Greece, Greece has surprised the global community because I remind you that through the very difficult period of the memoranda, Greece had been, according to OECD, among the champions in reforms. But because of particularly this period, things are still quite difficult. And it is not only digitalization. There are other disrupting megatrends. It's the climate change, it's the demographics. Greece is one of the countries with the lowest birth rate, which has again an impact to the labor market and to pension system. And so the need for reforms, sorry, and investments, sorry, is a must. But Greece is not alone. Since COVID-19, we understood that the pandemic has no boundaries. And the pandemic has highlighted the need for more effective EU cooperation and fiscal solidarity. And yes, European Union made a political manifestation of solidarity and cooperation. And I think this is a kind of revolution if we know how difficult it is for an agreement between member states on this issue. And RRF has been the most important tool in the kit. Now, after two major crises, and despite limitation and weaknesses, Greece is now in an uphill indeed. And I very much believe, and I am optimistic, that the quick and efficient use of RRF funds is of major importance, so that Greece, that this uphill becomes a stable condition in the future. Let's hope that political stability will allow Greece to continue this very, very positive line in digital policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diamantopoulou, for this very thorough contribution, including discussing the various inequalities that Greece is facing, including in the digital era, and also some of the limitations for Greece to progress. Now, let me also ask two follow-up questions to you. I mean, the first one is that you talked about non-standard forms of employment in Greece. If I recall, you said 45%, so almost one half of the population is in one of such a form of employment. And I wonder how you evaluate the current social protection that those workers in Greece currently benefit from. And another one on inequalities. So you said there are many different inequalities, including in access to, for example, digital services. I think you said that in 10 of 20 workers would not be able to do telework, which is a remarkably high number, I think. So how do you see that in a more European comparison? So the inequalities in Greece are much higher than elsewhere in Europe, or it's more in line with challenges of, let's say, similar countries like Portugal or some Central European countries?
The first question has to do with some particularities in Greece, which is not a new phenomenon, but an old one, and it has to do with self-employed. You know that in Greece, we had always the highest rate of self-employed people, which was more than 35%. And now with platforms and new standard forms, we have a kind of self-employed people. So you know very well that in areas like Airbnb, for example, they don't use the word work or worker, but the word provider of services, which changes the whole concept. So what I believe, and this is why I referred to social partners and particularly to the general Association of Workers in Greece, there is a need of discussion between the social partners and with the government in order to proceed with new kind of regulation, because it is really a problem, and it is a problem for the financing of the social protection system. And the second issue is that I belong to these who do not believe that self-employed and very small companies can support the growth model of Greece. And I'm saying that because there are many in Greece that believe that very small companies and self-employed is a machine of growth. So because I believe I have the first approach, I believe that through this RRF, government has the opportunity to support Greek companies to be bigger and to organize clusters who will help the osmosis between very small and medium-sized companies. Now, your second question, where I said that 10 out of 20 most in-demand professions do not have the capacity to work remotely. There, it has to do with digital skills. And there is a huge budget, it's about 2 billion euros for Greece for digital skills beyond the educational system for the citizens. And I think here is a big challenge for the Greek government. Being a commissioner for employment and social affairs and a minister for lifelong learning, so I have the two approaches, the European and the Greek one, I know that Greece until now has not been effective and successful in an effective use of the money for lifelong learning. So here there is a need of a very deep reform concerning concrete goals. I think what it is important for the Greek government is to present quantitative goals. So in 2013, this percentage of population will have participated in this kind of seminars in schools. In 2014, in 2016, we'll have the average of Europe, but we need quantitative goals. And comparing with other countries, yes, today we discussed with Greece, and I always believe that we must be very clear and identifying strengths and weaknesses of the country. But yes, there are many other countries who have this or other kind of problems. For example, Greece has 30% of its population with a university diploma, which is one of the best in the world. The same for women with university diploma. So it has a huge potential on this issue. This is why I believe that it could be a national goal to be in the first countries in Europe. So I cannot say, that Greece is lagging behind. Yes, it's lagging behind in concrete areas, and other countries in the south and in the east lagging behind in different areas.
Thank you very much, Ms. Diamantopoulou, for this very clear answer. Now let me turn to Minister Pirakakis and ask you to respond some of the comments that Ms. Diamantopoulou made. For example, she acknowledged that there were very significant legislative initiatives in the past few years, but also listed some limitations which can hinder the achievement of a fair society, including, for example, not very effective public administration, very limited social dialogue, low private research and development funding, or a very significant underfunding of the education research systems. So how do you see these problems, and what's the government is doing to address these problems?
Well, my first comment on this starts from the same, I would say, observation that Ms. Diamantopoulou made from the starting point through which you initiate changes in the policy approach of a government. My claim would be that in all areas we have seen, as I mentioned, the needle to be moving through the policy outcomes of this government and through the approaches. I would certainly mention that on the digital front, for instance, one of the core people who has been advising us is Thomas Hendrik Ilves, the former president of Estonia. And at the beginning, what he told us was that the first year, let's say, of digital policy in our portfolio would be the year of legislation and regulation, and the next years are the years primarily of coding. Now, this is a simplification, but the idea is that you need to create the legislative and the regulatory infrastructure in order to be able to unleash policy potential in many areas. And again, in my view, what you will witness, I would say specifically from policy outcomes, I will mention my portfolio because it's the one that I can comment most comprehensively, would be that, for instance, Greece was the first country to transpose the Telecommunications Code of the European Union in its national legislative framework. And the fact that we have managed to advance not only a digital transformation Bible, but a digital transformation code, a law, we call it a code, but it's not really a code in strict legal terms, but it's a core legislative approach which touches upon all elements of digital, not in elements which pertain to what we call the fourth industrial revolution. We're doing this right now. We're currently, and we will seek the advice of many experts on that field. I would say primarily I would seek the advice of Anna Diamantopoulou on how we would do this. On how to regulate certain elements which haven't yet been regulated at the EU level, even domestically, in order to render Greece a burning platform for digital. Obviously, there have been areas where progress has been most apparent. There have been areas where progress has been less visible. I would say that digital has an added component. It has what programmers call UX, user experience. One can directly experience services on their mobile phones and on their screens, whereas certain regulatory approaches are less tangible and it takes more time to perceive their impacts. But there have been many policy innovations in previous years, even going way back. And let me mention one, which I think is quite important, because Greece has managed to produce a unicorn in the last couple of weeks, Viva Wallet, a big portion of which was bought by JP Morgan. And the creation of companies such as Viva in the previous years became possible through a policy innovation where many people participated. Back in 2010, 2009, 2011, this started by leveraging the capabilities of the EIF, of the European Investment Fund, and advancing what was originally the Jeremy program and what advanced to the Equifund program. Anna Diamantopoulou was one of the people who actually worked on this project. And we created many funds which financed lots of startups in Greece in the previous years, and this is why we have managed to also produce a couple of unicorns right now, which we didn't have 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And this took place because policy continued even through different administrations of different parties. Everybody agreed upon this set of policies. Our goal in digital is the same. It should be a national plan. Our goal in many other things should be the same. And let me say that I strongly adhere to one point that Anna Diamantopoulou raised, I would say, even above all else, lifelong learning. We know that we have two parallel effects. The first one is that life expectancy is increasing and it will keep increasing. Every 4 years, pre-COVID, life expectancy increased by 1 year every 4 years, and we don't have data to justify that this will stop. So my children, I have 3, around the age of 5, one is 6, the other are 4.5, 4.5, have the potential to even reach the age of 100. So if you live that long, you will have many careers. So you will need to switch careers throughout your life. And this will require a different educational setup, a different way in which you inject skills in your CV throughout your career. So having this as a mandatory element, let's say, of the education system, as a change to how the education system operates, and having the state sponsor this to the maximal extent is something which we're examining, not only as Greeks, I would say throughout the European Union. This is a puzzle, it's a challenge, how to re-engineer educational systems in order to be able to advance lifelong learning. One can see even significant European or American universities whereas they were focusing 10 or 15 or 20 years back to their master's degrees or to their PhD degrees. Now, let's say, if you look at the website of MIT and a couple of departments at MIT, you will see that they advance their MicroMaster's degrees or their skills enrichment programs. And this will take place, I would say, throughout the university systems of all the world. So it's a puzzle. It's not yet clear how this puzzle will be solved. The RRF has significant funds for reskilling and lifelong learning. And currently, as a government, we're advancing a new regulatory and new legal framework vis-a-vis how we, I would say, govern this area and how certifications will take place, etc. But still, there are many elements that remain to be solved and resolved in the coming years.
Thank you very much, Minister, for this response. Now, questions are coming in the chat function, and again, let me encourage the participants to type their questions. So let me raise two questions. The first one is by Sophie Sampalas. I hope I pronounced your name more or less well. So she was wondering what Greece is doing to ease the access of digital services for cross-border users. And the second question by Dieter Bökem, who asked whether the general data protection regulation hinder advancements, in particular when listening to the digital, when talking about the digitalization of the health system. So whether GDPR is makes things more difficult. So maybe if you could address these two questions, I would appreciate that.
With regards to the general data protection regulation, I would say that to the contrary, and as a citizen, not as a minister, I think that we're very lucky to have such regulations that govern the privacy and the safety of our data. And in reality, the EU has managed to underline its role as a regulatory superpower through regulations such as the GDPR, which in effect affected technological development by large technological players. So in this regard, I don't believe that the GDPR hinders progress. The GDPR changes the way this regulation is taking place, changes the way this progress takes place. And in reality, the way the GDPR is interpreted takes place through the local independent authorities, the local regulatory authorities on data protection. We're in a very strong collaboration with the relevant independent authority in order to draft an approach on the digitization of patient records, as the question underlines, in a manner which both guarantees the quality of service and the privacy of data. Now, with regards to cross-border users and cross-border data, I would say that the big puzzle that we had to solve, again, is what was discussed before. We had to digitize services and offer better services first domestically. To give you one example of the challenge, of the scope of the challenge, there have been certain life events in Greece which required more than 10 steps, certain life events more than 20 bureaucratic steps. This is a huge challenge to resolve through interoperability on a domestic manner. Now, the cross-border users, I think, is something which will be further facilitated by large interoperability projects at the European scale. The EIDAS directive is central in this role. Second, the COVID certificate of the European Union, in our view, is the largest interoperability project in the history of the European Union. It was deployed in a couple of months. And we need to take the lessons of the COVID era and translate those lessons into policy actions of tomorrow, which are not COVID specific. The EU COVID certificate, in my view, is instrumental in order to be a lesson for such cross-border interoperabilities, given the systems of every member state of the EU. But this is one of the upcoming challenges, I would say.
Thank you very much. If I can, Ms. Diamantopoulos, would you like, you are muted. Ms. Diamantopoulos, would you like to add, but you're still muted?
Okay, I didn't know why it didn't work. Thank you. I would like to make a general comment for Europe on the directive for GDPR. Yes, I agree with Mr. Pirakakis that Europe has been a global champion, but what it has not done is that at the same time, it could support the creation of a whole sector of business supporting the implementation of GDPR, and it didn't do that. So in many cases, it has been bureaucratic. In many, I participate now, particularly because of my capacity, in many discussions with people from business and different sectors, and they really have problems concerning their competitiveness, taking into account what in other continents, what in other continents the situation is. So I think that we have to see it at the European level, how to work better with GDPR.
Thank you very much. Now, the next two questions relate to the Greek EID. Agnieszka Plibanovic asked whether the Greek government plans to notify the Greek EID within the European EIDAS system, and if so, when. And the follow-up question by Jatigva Tudek asked whether the taxis EID scheme will be pre-notified under the EIDAS system, and whether there are any other plans for any EID scheme in the near future.
Let me first comment on the second element of the question. The identity system is one of the core elements of how a country offers digital public services. So what we tried to do at the beginning, let's see at where we started. First, Greece does not have a unique number for citizens, meaning that we don't have a unique number which we're using in the interactions between a citizen and the state. We have 4 key databases which we use as a country for identification, one for taxation, one for social security, one for participation in elections, and one for the national ID, which we have been issuing for many years. And what we have been trying to achieve starting there is to build up the system in order to have a more comprehensive system of identity. What we have done so far, we have started advancing the notion of a golden record of those 4 key databases. National vaccination proved to be instrumental in terms of identifying citizens because we needed to prioritize the vaccination process. So this is again an outcome of pandemic-specific pandemic-specific policies. Again, I mentioned we instrumentalized the access of the banking system credentials in order for citizens to be able to authenticate themselves for state services, together with what we have already been doing using our taxi system credentials. But in reality, we have also procured a new system for national identities because the Greek national identity needs to change, it's old. So our plan is to have both a digital identity on mobile phones, because after all, identity is transitioning from something you show, from something you have, to something you know, to something you are, using specific types of technologies in order to facilitate this. And obviously, this will happen through very close interaction with EU authorities, and we will make certain notifications given the EIDAS scheme. This is the responsibility of an independent authority in Greece. By law, EIDAS is part of the Telecommunications Independent Authority, so they will make the notification at some point. But in reality, our key goal here is to make a very swift and I would say symbolic transition from the national identity document of the past to digital identities, which will involve both something which one can show, but also something which touches upon existing credentials that they can use. We have managed to achieve the latter. We're about to achieve the former once the procurement process of the new identity cards will have been materialized.
Thank you very much. Ms. Diamantopoulou, would you like to add, or should we move to the next question?
Yes, to the next question.
So the next 2 questions, I selected 2 questions which are quite general about what kind of digital services are available. So there's one question by Agnieszka Plebnanovic. She asked, what are the digital public services available for businesses in Greece? For example, can a company be registered online? I mean, you mentioned that a recent study showed that Greece has reached the average level of the EU in terms of digital public administration. So I believe there are many different areas. And another question by George Grillos, who asked whether you can give an overview of the digitization actions with regard to the administration of justice in Greece. So if you could answer these two questions, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
First of all, as I mentioned before, the government portal includes a full scope of services which we offer online, and I checked at the current number of gov.gr services, and they are 1,325 because we keep on adding. So there is a subcategory of gov.gr which involves businesses. Now, this is an area which requires more digitization. It's one of the less mature areas. I would say the most mature area vis-a-vis digitization is our taxation system. The least mature, there are a couple which I would call the least mature. You mentioned the SMEs, businesses overall. I would add the justice system amongst the least mature as well. Vis-a-vis SMEs, one can register a company online, a specific type of company, not all types of companies online. So we plan to change that and augment by having other types of companies being able to be registered online, but the most prominent, let's say, type of company can be registered online. Many digital services are offered for companies vis-a-vis intellectual property, patents, and certainly, as I mentioned before, taxation. All the taxation, all the interaction with the independent tax authority is fully digital. But again, many things are missing there. So in reality, the penetration of digital in the private sector in Greece, if one does not focus on what I mentioned before, the emerging innovation ecosystem taking place through, I would say, this very significant policy that I mentioned of the previous years, I think one can see, exactly because of what Anna Diamantopoulou said before, the structure of Greek companies, the fact that we have many micro enterprises in Greece, one can see not that significant penetration of digital in the smaller players of our economic system. So what we plan to do, amongst other things, is advance, and I'm doing this together with my colleague of the Ministry of Economic Development, my colleagues, Mr. Georgiadis and Mr. Papathanasis. We're trying to see two things. The first one is how we can subsidize, how we can incentivize specific types of technological solutions for companies leveraging RRF funds. Again, a policy which can be facilitated by the RRF. And some things are obvious there, again, missing things from the past. Certain companies don't even have ERP systems, while they need them. But if one thinks a little bit laterally, cybersecurity, for instance, is a necessity, even for non-obvious players. We typically think that cybersecurity is necessary for larger companies. But I would say that even a small legal firm which handles sensitive data should have cybersecurity. And you can facilitate this transition by both incentivizing it and offering new technological products, as we plan to do using the specific instrument of the RRF, and through regulation and through a regulatory approach. So currently we're focusing on a law, as I mentioned before, which has this element of emerging technologies like blockchain and how to regulate it. But within the same piece of legislation, we're trying to see how to activate digital in the private economy. And this is a big question mark, and again, a big issue that needs to be solved. And you mentioned the justice system. Vis-a-vis the justice system, again, I would call it one of the least digitized policy areas, let's say, of Greece. We have managed to digitize the courts of the penal justice in 4 cities, Athens, Thessaloniki, Piraeus, and Chalkida, as we say in Greece. But we haven't fully digitized the whole penal justice system. We haven't fully digitized the Court of Auditors to the extent to which we would have wanted, and we haven't digitized the other elements of the justice system overall. Again, we're doing quick wins, as I mentioned before, small, symbolic, and I would say useful new simplifications and digitizations of the system, having lawyers provide lawyers the possibility for what is already digitized to use digital, let's say, paperwork rather than going straight in physical presence in the courts using digital signatures, etc. But the elephant in the room here are the systems that we're missing. So here we're advancing a full spectrum of projects, mostly by the RRF. The big project is the full digitization of the justice system with regards to the information systems that are needed by different elements of the justice system. The second one is, again, the digitization of paper records. We will have that one for the justice system. The third one is the capability to use simple technologies in courts so that we don't need to physically type what is being said. Recordings, again, an RRF project. And finally, we will be using teleconferencing for courts. This is not an RRF project. It's a project that we're using the previous European structural funds period, where a Greek citizen of the islands will be able to go, let's say, to a police department of the island and participate in a court hearing rather than having to go to Athens or Piraeus or anywhere else in Greece. So, but one can overall see that the approach here, again, is a gap analysis. What was there is being leveraged, and we're offering small services and quick win services given the systems that we have, and this is what has made this policy area popular in Greece and effective. But what is missing, which is the elephant in the room, in certain policy areas, a lot of things like the justice system, the RRF is the core instrument through which we're procuring large projects. Now, obviously, because this involves large procurements, this is not something that can become material within a couple of months. A large procurement process can take a lot of time throughout Europe and here as well. This is something that we're trying to see how to optimize. And then it takes some time to develop certain types of systems that have this nature, a year and a half, 2 years after a contract is being signed. But overall, if you look at the period of the Digital Transformation Bible, all of these projects, I think, will be procured in the next couple of years. So we shall expect to see the results by 2025, 2026, with certain exceptions. Certain projects will take a little bit more time to become material, like the Greek ERP. But most of the projects will take a couple of years. So I think that very soon we will see a very big qualitative leap once those projects kick in, and we will be able to fit them in the existing digital system that we have.
Thank you very much. Now there are two questions which relate to the private sector. Please, sorry, please.
I'm coming back again to the priority of digital skills. The minister has replied on 3 issues, the SMEs, the justice system, and even he made a reference to virtual trials, which is something really very, very, very important for Greece. My point is the following. Should the government subsidize a very small, a micro business with 1 person or 2 persons, if there is no certification for the owner that has participated in a digital reskilling seminar? We subsidize companies, very small companies, we have done it in the past, and buying a computer or 2 or 3 apps, they believe that they have digitalized the company. So in order to make this business open to the world, so digital market, the global market, to look outside Greece, etc., we need a different size and a lot of social investment to the owners. So I believe that priority must be in this plan, in this G2 2.0 plan for Greece, to invest on clusters concerning the micro business and on digital skills for the owners. The second issue, the justice system, is just an example, but it is one of the most difficult in Greece because, again, it is a matter of digital skills. Have we the exact number, the precise numbers? What is the number of judges, or what is the number of the court staff that have digital skills? Even from the lawyers, I could say, but there is a need of registration. There is a need of having the data. What is the major problem in this sector? So on the one side, we have to organize and to develop systems and to invest in devices and 5G, etc. And on the other side, the human resource issue, which becomes more and more important. Because let's go to the islands. Their e-health and e-justice, you can imagine how important it is for a country with so many islands. But even if you have the system in place, and if you have the doctors and the judges who are digital, who have digital skills, what about the people there? If they cannot participate, if they cannot understand, if they don't have the basic skills. So again, next to any kind of priority must be the priority of digital skills.
It's an absolutely important point, emphasizing digital literacy and digital skills. So indeed, let me ask the minister, how do you see this problem, upskilling of the general Greek population? And also there was a question, especially on SMEs, how the Greek government aims to support the digitalization of SMEs. But I think, as Ms. Diamantopoulou very rightly noted, even if you support them to buy new computers and whatever digital equipment, if they don't have the proper skills to operate them, then it will be certainly much less efficient investment. So, Minister, can you elaborate the skill issue somewhat, please?
With regards to skills, I absolutely agree. I think it's absolutely essential. The elephant in the room is how to do it, not whether to do it. We have a couple of projects. This is in our governmental setup. This is a work conducted by the Ministry of Labour, but we have a strong focus as a ministry on digital skills. And what we have been focusing on are many clusters of reskilling. To give you one example, let's take this new ministry, this hub at the core of government on digital. In our view, we should be investing in our people. We need to provide access to them for digital certifications which have an international nature on how to obtain new cybersecurity certifications, cloud certifications, depending on what each works at. So one of the projects which we have advanced and we're expecting to see materializing is providing access to these international certifications for digital throughout the Greek public sector. Let's say this is one element of the work. A second element of the work potentially, and this is something that the Minister of Defense, Mr. Panagotopoulos in Greece, really wants, is how to change the structure of the army service in Greece. We have a mandatory army service of 9 months, around a year. And in reality, we're thinking of injecting skills and skills enrichment and certifications throughout that period. So this is again a project included in the RRF, but again, those two are two, let's say, quite concrete and targeted projects. The biggest project is the one that's part of this discussion, part of this debate, how to create lifelong learning opportunities and access to reskilling for citizens at any facet of life, at any part of their lives, from something which can be quite easy, how to have access to government services and how to use gov.gr and all those new emerging opportunities, to something which can be quite more sophisticated and comprehensive, like learning how to code in Python or Ruby. What we have done so far is something as a first step, is the creation of what we call the National Digital Academy, which is effectively a website which aggregates content and has a self-diagnostic test taken from European authorities, where one, depending on what they want to learn, can have access and focus on specific types of digital skills, speaking for digital per se. Of course, this is not certified. Of course, this is just the first step. It's not a silver bullet. We need to do many things. We need to leverage significant funding opportunities, which we have. But in reality, the next step in our case as a government will be how to properly regulate, facilitate, legislate who shall be the skills provider and what are the necessary ingredients for this provision. For us, this is, I think, the core element of what we need to resolve, and this is something that Mr. Hadzidakis, my colleague, is very significantly focusing on. With regards to SMEs, I mentioned it a little bit before. I fully agree. It shouldn't be mundane things like obtaining a computer, etc. And in reality, we should be quite tight vis-a-vis our focus. We need to target SMEs, but we need to target only those who have the potential to upgrade themselves. So the idea of how this tool will be tailored, that I mentioned before, through the RRF on incentivizing SMEs to digitize, A, this is happening in very strong collaboration with the Commission. B, through this interaction, we're only focusing on emerging and necessary technological ingredients, cybersecurity, data analytics and artificial intelligence, cloud services. We would ideally want certain elements which are not only forward-looking because we have a gap in ERP systems or in other types of systems. This is still under discussion. It will materialize. And I agree that this should be matched with reskilling. So incentivizing not only the technology, but training with regards to how to use this technology. But again, there the debate is the regulation of skills provision. And this is why I believe that this is the core focus of what we're trying to achieve right now.
Thank you very much. The time is running. We have 4 more minutes. So there is one final question, which is by Mr. Nikolaos Milinois, the European Court of Auditors member. And I would like to ask both of you to respond. It's about the role of transparency and public scrutiny in the assessment of RRF. So he writes that websites dedicated to the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Plan have been set up in every member state. The achievements or missing milestones and targets will be widely published. And the question is, how do you see the role of transparency and public scrutiny in the achievement of RRF objectives, also in terms of political accountability? So maybe first the minister and then the last word to Ms. Diamantopoulou.
One of the digital innovations that Greece advanced prior to our policy initiatives of the last 2.5 years has been a system which I think is quite innovative, a system called Diavia. Diavia is the Greek word for transparency. This was advanced by the cabinet where Ms. Diamantopoulou participated. And it's a system which involves uploading all spending decisions of the Greek state in a single website and having everybody have access to any spending decision being made or any decision which has a spending outcome. This project is a phenomenal innovation, not only for Greece, but I think globally. And a project which we're continuing and we're trying to upgrade. So this answers part of your question. There is a procurement transparency by definition in all procurements done by the Greek state. On top of this, one of the things that the responsible ministry are currently about the RRF is currently contemplating, discussing is having the metrics of the RRF and the metrics of the RRF deployment be transparent by definition, because we want to have maximum dialogue and maximum, I would say, democratic debate on the topics. But actually, we view this as an opportunity. In reality, this project is a game changer. I called it before a Marshall Plan for Greece. We want maximum communication for these projects and how these projects are changing overall the way the Greek economic system functions. This is good for Greece, this is good for Europe, and it's very good for Europe's perception, the European Union's perception domestically in Greece. So by definition, this is something which should be as transparent as possible.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ms. Diamantopoulou.
I would like just to make not an advice, but a proposal to Minister Pierakakis. I think that yes, it is this RRF is really a challenge and Marshall Plan for this century. But I think it is extremely important, not only the qualitative goals that he has referred to, but I think that the government has to choose 10 concrete quantitative goals and then to share them to regions. So each region for each year will have to reach some concrete quantitative goals, because this is something that it is not in our culture. So we know we have a culture of philosophical policy, and we need to proceed in another era of evidence-based policy, and evidence needs numbers. So I think that the government has to put itself in a position to be evaluated by concrete quantitative goals that will be achieved. And I think particularly with Mr. Pierakakis in this sector, it has quite good possibilities to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So since the time is up, my last role is to thank you, all of you, for participating. I mean, first of all, Mr. Nikolaos Milinois from the European Court of Auditors to host this discussion, Ms. Anna Diamantopoulou and Mr. Kyriakos Piriakakis, and for all the participants who were here today. I think we had a very insightful discussion. If I can summarize the main takeaway that I will take home from this discussion is that Greece started from a very weak position. It made great progress, and I think the outlook is there are good reasons to be optimistic, but there are many challenges that the country still faces, which should be solved. And I hope also that this debate has helped to clarify those challenges. So with these closing words, let me thank you again for all of you participating, and wish you a good day. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for this organization.
Thank you.